a flash of light, then metal, concrete, and silence. It happened in seconds. A black Mercedes speeding to the Pont de l'Alma tunnel in Paris, chased by a swarm of paparazzi. Cameras flashed like lightning. Then impact. The world's most photographed woman, Princess Diana, lay motionless in the wreckage. Her final moments were chaos. Sirens screaming, glass scattered like confetti. And yet it ended in silence. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not to her. Not like this. Because Diana wasn't just royalty. She was the people's princess. A mother. A symbol. A rebel in pearls. And now she was gone at just 36. But here's what no one wants to admit. There's no good reason she should have died that night, unless someone wanted her gone. And now, after decades of whispers, conspiracy, and carefully worded denials, the man who led the official investigation has broken his silence. What he says doesn't just raise eyebrows. It raises the deadliest question of all. Did Diana know she was going to die? And if so, who did she think would kill her? She was born into nobility, but Diana Spencer didn't walk into the royal spotlight. She was pushed into it. Just 20 years old when she married Prince Charles, the shy kindergarten teacher, became a global sensation overnight. She wasn't just Princess Diana. She was the people's princess, adored not because she played by royal rules, but because she broke them. She hugged AIDS patients when others wore gloves. She held landmine victims when governments looked away. She made eye contact. She listened. She cared. And the world loved her for it. But behind the camera flashes was a much darker picture. Her marriage to Charles was fractured from the start. Rumors of affairs, cold silences, and public humiliation plagued her every move. By 1992, the cracks were public. By 1996, the divorce was final. And by 1997, Diana was finally free, or so it seemed. That summer, Diana was spotted on yachts, holding hands with Dodi Fayed, laughing again. She looked radiant, alive. And then, in the early hours of August 31st, 1997, it all ended in a Paris tunnel. According to the official report, Diana's driver, Henri Paul, under the influence of alcohol and prescription drugs, lost control of the car while fleeing paparazzi. The car struck the 13th pillar of the Pont de l'Alma tunnel at nearly 65 miles per hour. Dodi died instantly. Henri Paul, too. Diana was pulled from the wreckage, still alive, but critically injured. She died hours later in a French hospital. Case closed, or so they said. But for millions around the world, it never added up. How could the most photographed woman in the world be so poorly protected? Why were CCTV cameras turned off that night? Why did it take over 90 minutes to get her to the hospital, just 4 miles away? And why did Diana herself, in a chilling letter written 2 years earlier, predict she'd be killed in a car crash? For years, these questions were dismissed as conspiracy, whispers, tabloids, fan theories. Until now, because the man who once stood by the official version, the former head of police who oversaw key parts of the investigation, has come forward. And what he reveals doesn't just reopen old wounds. Before the tunnel, before the wreckage, before the world went still, there was a woman trying to live again. That summer, Diana seemed lighter. She had stepped away from the royal shadows and stepped into the sun, quite literally, on a yacht off the coast of Sardinia. And by her side was a man most in Britain had never heard of, until suddenly they had. Dodi Al-Fayed, the son of billionaire Mohammed Al-Fayed. Dodi was wealthy, Egyptian, and Muslim. Everything the British establishment wasn't. To some, he was just a playboy. To others, especially to Mohammed, he was a man who could finally give Diana what she was never allowed: freedom, love, and protection. Mohammed Al-Fayed would later claim something explosive, that Diana was pregnant, that she and Dodi were engaged, that they were planning to announce it publicly just days after returning from Paris. And most dangerously of all, that the royal family knew, because of Diana, the mother of the future king, married a Muslim man and bore his child. It wouldn't just be a scandal. It would be a threat to the monarchy itself. And according to Mohammed, that was enough motive for silence, for control. even for murder. Understood? But was it all wild theory? Or was Diana herself afraid? There's one moment that still haunts the timeline, long before Dodi, long before Paris. 1995. Diana sits down with journalist Martin Bashir for what would become one of the most iconic and controversial interviews in royal history, the Panorama interview. Her voice was soft, but the words cut like glass. There were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded. What the world didn't fully grasp then was that this wasn't just gossip. It was a coded warning. In that same era, Diana told friends she believed her phone was tapped. She would frequently switch cars mid-journey. She felt watched, followed, unsafe. And then came the most chilling clue of all, a handwritten letter, later revealed by her butler Paul Burrell. Diana's words, scrawled in ink. This particular phase of my life is the most dangerous. My husband is planning an accident in my car, brake failure and serious head injury. She wrote that in 1995, 2 years before she died in a car crash, in a tunnel, with no seatbelt, and a head injury so severe it couldn't be reversed. To the outside world, Diana was finally finding peace. But behind her smile, she knew the danger hadn't passed. It had evolved, become quieter, more calculated. And though she was no longer a wife to the heir, she was still the mother of a future king. And that meant she would never be just Diana again. She would always be a symbol. And symbols, in the wrong hands, can become threats or targets. The official story has always been simple. A tragic accident, a drunk driver, a chaotic chase through the Paris night. But from the very beginning, something fell off. It started with a flash. Literally. Multiple eyewitnesses described a blinding white light seconds before the crash in the Pont de l'Alma tunnel. Not camera flashes. Not headlights. A pulse. Sudden, sharp, disorienting. Some believe it was no accident. Former MI6 officer Richard Tomlinson testified that British intelligence had once considered using a strobe light weapon to disorient a target in a tunnel. The exact tactic witnesses described. The same method. The same setting. The same result. Then came the missing footage. The Alma tunnel was covered by 10 CCTV cameras, but none of them apparently captured the crash. French authorities claimed the cameras were either facing the wrong way or simply turned off. 10 cameras, 0 footage. At the exact moment one of the world's most high-profile women was killed. Then there was a driver, Henri Paul. According to police, he was drunk, more than 3 times over the legal limit. But here's where it gets murky. Security footage from just before the crash shows Henri walking steadily, engaging in calm conversation, unlocking doors without fumbling. No swaying, no slurring, no signs of severe intoxication. Then the toxicology reports were released, and questions exploded. Traces of carbon monoxide were found in Henri Paul's blood at lethal levels. But if that were true, he should have been unconscious, not driving. Some experts questioned whether the blood tested was even his. And then his bank records surfaced. Henri Paul, a man with a modest salary, suddenly had thousands of francs in new deposits. Who was paying him? And why? Next, the white Fiat Uno. Paint traces from the wreckage revealed Diana's car had collided with another vehicle seconds before hitting the pillar. But that car, a white Fiat Uno, vanished. Never found. Never officially identified. Then a name surfaced. James Unanswered, a paparazzo known to follow Diana. He owned a white Fiat. He was in Paris that night. And in 2000, he was found burned to death in his car, in the middle of the woods. The official verdict? Suicide. But the car doors were locked. There was no smoke in his lungs. And no clear reason why he would torch himself. There are moments in history that feel like they should have stopped the world. Moments where everything we thought we knew begins to unravel. One of those moments came not in a courtroom, not in a press conference, but in a letter. A letter Diana wrote by hand, folded, sealed, and left in the care of someone she trusted, her former butler, Paul Burrell. The letter was written in 1995, 2 years before the crash. At the time, Diana had already separated from Charles, But their divorce wasn't final. And more than just heartbreak, Diana felt something deeper, more dangerous. She felt watched, isolated, hunted, and so she put pen to paper and wrote what can only be described as a prophecy. Burrell kept that letter locked away for years. And when it was finally revealed to the public, the world gasped. Diana wrote, "This particular phase of my life is the most dangerous. My husband is planning an accident in my car, brake failure, and serious head injury. Asterisk. To make the path clear by the early 2000s, the pressure had become impossible to ignore. Too many whispers, too many headlines, too many questions that had never been answered. So in 2004, 7 years after Diana's death, British authorities launched a formal investigation, Operation Paget. It was meant to be definitive, a line drawn under the speculation. Over 800 pages, interviews with 300 witnesses, millions spent. The goal? To once and for all prove that Diana's death was not the result of foul play, but the result left more people unconvinced than ever. Paget concluded that Diana died because Henri Paul, intoxicated and speeding, lost control while fleeing paparazzi. They acknowledged poor planning, media pressure, delayed medical response. But murder? Conspiracy? Dismissed. Unfounded. Labeled not credible. Even Diana's handwritten letter, the one that warned of brake sabotage and a planned head injury, was included but ultimately brushed aside. They called it emotional, paranoid, a woman under stress, projecting fear. But if that's all it was, a coincidence, why was the letter never submitted in full during earlier French investigations? Why did it take nearly a decade for the public to even see it? And why, even in Paget's thousands of documents, were so many critical elements omitted? Former MI6 officer Richard Tomlinson testified that Henri Paul had been in contact with intelligence agencies, a claim dismissed by British officials, but never fully disproven. Tomlinson also referenced a file he saw years earlier, a proposed assassination plot that looked disturbingly similar to Diana's death. Flash of light, road, tunnel, engineered crash, media chaos, and then silence. Tomlinson would later be arrested, discredited, threatened. Then there's James Ananson, the photographer who owned a white Fiat Uno, the same model seen near the crash site, and believed to have collided with Diana's car. And Danson's vehicle was never fully investigated. He later died in what was ruled a suicide, locked inside a burnout car. His body was found with a gunshot wound, yet no gun was ever recovered. To Mohammed Al-Fayed, the signs were undeniable. They murdered my son. They murdered Diana. And now they want us to forget. He called for inquiry after inquiry. He stood in front of press cameras. He waved documents, photos, letters. But to the establishment, he was dismissed as grieving, obsessed, emotional. Maybe he was. But maybe he was also right. In a post-Megxit era, where Prince Harry and Meghan Markle exposed the inner workings of the royal machine, the cracks have only deepened. Public trust in the institution is no longer unshakable, and many who once believed Diana's death was a tragic accident now pause, reconsider, because Diana wasn't just a royal. She was a woman torn between duty and defiance. And when she stepped outside the boundaries of what was expected, when she fell in love, challenged power, and chose her own future, she became dangerous, not to the people, seen not as a crown, but as a person. And that changed everything. In the eyes of the public, Diana was more than a princess. She was a mother, a survivor, a symbol of what it meant to stand alone in a world built to silence women like her. She was imperfect, emotional, raw, human. But that's exactly why people loved her, and maybe why the system never forgave her. Because Diana didn't just leave the royal family. She exposed it. She showed us what it meant to be inside the palace and still be unprotected. She chose heart over protocol, vulnerability over obedience, and for that, she became more powerful in death than anyone inside those walls ever imagined. The final words echo, not from a speech, but from her own handwriting. I am sitting here at my desk today in October, longing for someone to hug me and encourage me to keep strong and hold my head high. A woman, in her own words, alone, afraid, and somehow still holding her head high. Was she warning us all along? Did Diana know she was walking through a storm she wouldn't survive? Understood. Nearly 3 decades have passed. New royals have risen. The world has changed. And yet, this story hasn't gone quiet, because some wounds never heal, especially when the truth is still bleeding beneath them. So we ask, what happens when a woman threatens power and loses her voice forever? Can the truth survive 30 years of silence? Who benefits from keeping Diana's story unfinished? And maybe the most haunting question of all, is someone still afraid of what she knew? Because Diana may be gone, but her shadow still walks the halls, and her voice refuses to die.